Welcome to the Dire podcast. I am your host, Sean Pfeil, and today we're going to have a lot of fun. Got a lot of awesome stuff to talk about. We're going to kick things off with some paste bin rumors. There's a lot of juicy info in there, most of it fake. But it's still fun to think about, and some of these things are actually realistic and might happen. And so we're going to walk through some of those. We're going to take a quick meditation break to spice things up. We're going to add 3 games to the list, which is all of the games I have ever played ranked in list format. We're going to add Pong, Marble Madness, and this episode's featured game, World of Warcraft. For those of you watching on YouTube, I am still playing Kuni, so that's the video you are seeing. For those of you listening on Apple or Google or Spotify podcasts, you can head over to dirediredocs.com to find the video version of this podcast, if you so choose. All right, let's dig into this. There's a lot of rumors here that were put onto Pastebin. It's very clearly fake, and some of these things that were listed have already been proven as fake. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but there's some things on here I want to talk about, not because I think they're real, but because, they could be. Some of them could be. Most of them very likely are not. But they're fun to think about. There's a lot of cool things on here that I hadn't thought of or would be exciting to see. Some of it is realistic. It doesn't mean it's happening, but it's worth going through and commenting about. So we're going to start with Capcom. I'm going to go through a couple of these. A new Monster Hunter game coming exclusively to the Switch that will use some of the new features and ideas from Monster Hunter World. I don't think that would be out of the realm of possibility. Monster Hunter World was fantastic. That's the only Monster Hunter game I've played, so I can't really compare it to previous games in the franchise, but as I understand it, it was much more casual friendly. It was one of the easier games for new players to get into. So if they bring something like that to the Switch, I'd be in. Monster Hunter on the go is a lot easier, I think, to sink time into than Monster Hunter on a console hooked up to your TV. So I'd be in for the Switch. They also talk about one of the future DLC characters for Super Smash Bros., which, the way I'm reading this, isn't the 5th character in the first Challenger Pack. It's going to be in a future Challenger Pack, which I'm pretty sure Nintendo announced they were doing more characters beyond the first 5. Anyway, they're saying one of those characters is going to be a Capcom representative. Not out of the realm of possibility there either. Clearly, Capcom and Nintendo, when it comes to Smash, have had a real good partnership. This person wrote that they've heard Dante, Phoenix Wright, or even Arthur from, I believe, the Ghosts and Goblins series would be contenders to go in there. I'm not really sure who I would think would go in. I don't actually think it would be any of those. If anybody from Capcom, at this point, it would be a Hunter from Monster Hunter, just because of how much Monster Hunter has been on Nintendo consoles in the past, specifically handhelds. Dante, I guess could be on there. I think they did a DMC port to the Switch. Phoenix Wright could also be a top contender. Wouldn't be sure how they'd play, but that could be an interesting character. Anyway, Capcom. Let's move on. Activision Blizzard. These are a little bit juicier. So they talk about StarCraft as a first-person shooter being revitalized. So StarCraft Ghost was a game from, over a decade ago that was supposed to be a first-person shooter. It was canceled, and since then, we got StarCraft 2. They are saying that StarCraft FPS, not necessarily Ghost, but StarCraft FPS is being revitalized since Destiny is no longer with Activision. Bungie parted ways with Activision, so they took Destiny with them. And according to this, Activision needs a new sci-fi shooter, and so they're looking at potentially StarCraft. I could see that happening, not necessarily for the reasons listed, but I believe Blizzard wants to do different things, different genres, different kinds of games than what they've been doing over the past few years. So I could see that happening, but I'm going to put that pretty low on the list from a possibility perspective. They also talk about the mobile department at Blizzard is ramping up, and they're going to create a Warcraft mobile game in the style of Pokemon Go. Honestly, I'd be all in for that. I play Pokemon Go semi-casually, but if they put a Warcraft skin on that, I think that would be the franchise that pulls me away. The Harry Potter one I didn't even pick up, and there's been a few others, but I think Jurassic Park or Jurassic World. Warcraft would be pretty cool. I'd be curious to see how they make that different from Pokemon Go, if such a thing actually exists. But I think that's a pretty cool rumor. I could see something like that happening, so we'll put that on the shelf for now. They also talk about a remake of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 coming out in 2021. Now, I'm going to put this one as, yeah, that's totally fake. It's weird that they've already got a year assigned, which I guess now that we're in 2020, 2021 is next year. So maybe that's not such a bad idea, especially if it's for next-gen consoles. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 were fantastic. I think they re-released them, or they did a port not too long ago, and I don't think it did very well, if I'm remembering correctly. So I don't really know what a remake would bring, but Tony Hawk Pro Skater back in the day got rave reviews. It was one of the most critically acclaimed games of the time. It was getting hundreds and high 90s all over the place. So interesting to see that make an appearance here on the list. Let's talk about Ubisoft. The next Assassin's Creed is Viking themed. Now this has been heavily rumored for a while. This one's likely true. And they mentioned that it brings back the boat features from Black Flag, which would be awesome. They've got Skull and Bones, which did that even come out? I don't recall that even coming out. That must be in development hell somewhere if it hasn't come out. But there's no campaign that I think that I can remember being announced for that game. So if they can bring back Black Flag in the form of Vikings, I think that would be great. That'd be awesome. Though Viking boats didn't have cannons, so I'm not really sure what the combat would look like there, ship-to-ship combat. But if it takes place in a Norse setting, that would be a lot of fun. The exploration there would be a lot of fun. Mario and Rabbids 2 does exist. Duh. That is clearly a game that they're working on. According to this, it's progressing very well. It'll release in 2020. I could see that happening. That could be a potential late summer or holiday game that they release on the Switch. What's the word I'm looking for? The list, the menu, the repertoire of games coming out later in the year is pretty barren right now. We don't know too many games that are coming out in the second half of the year. I could see this being part of it for sure. It's been 2 or 3 years. I think it came out in the original one came out in 2017? Does that sound right? 2017, 2018, 2017. I think it came out the year of Zelda. It came out the year the Switch launched. They're saying Rayman will have a major part in the game's story this time. which would be cool. I think a lot of people were hoping to see Rayman in the game. Didn't happen in the first one, but it could happen in the second. Not sure how to take the specifics of this rumor, but I'm pretty confident they're making this game. They also mentioned that Beyond Good and Evil 2 is not progressing very well. Apparently, it's had some rough development, and that's really all they're saying. They're saying the story's been planned out, the cinematics look good, though I don't know how they would know that. I don't know how many more cinematics they would have if the game itself is playing pretty rough. Yeah, actually, this is kind of believable too, only because, you know, they didn't show up with Beyond Good and Evil last year at E3 2019. 2018, we got we got a cinematic and then a little bit more about it, and I think 2017 is when they announced it. So yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while for this game. It's been 3+ years in development. I could see it having a troubled development cycle. So I hope that's not true, but we'll see. Still just a rumor for now. Rockstar. So just a couple things here. Number one, allegedly they will be bringing Grand Theft Auto 3, San Andreas, Vice City, the original Red Dead Redemption, Bully, and Grand Theft Auto 5 to the Nintendo Switch. It's interesting that they don't call out Grand Theft Auto 4. And that Grand Theft Auto 5 would be one of the first games to use the 64GB cartridge. I don't see this happening. I could see 1 or 2 Rockstar games showing up on the Switch. I don't think they're working on ports of all these games. I'm pretty sure that's false. But it would be pretty cool to see. Also, allegedly, Grand Theft Auto 6 is in production for next-gen systems. I could believe that. They go on to say that it would take place over the entire state of Florida, where you can go anywhere in the state. And maybe it would have to be some sort of weird compressed highway system if they're gonna maybe select the major cities in Florida and then have some sort of interconnecting highway system to get you there, or you're not really traveling across the state. They're just instant zones, and you have to load into the next area when you cross a certain threshold. The way they're wording it here, though, you can travel through the entire state, makes it sound like it's the entire state, which that's a cool idea. That would be nice to think about, especially since I live in Florida, but I don't see that happening. They also say that Sony has paid for 6 months of timed exclusivity, and that they paid a lot for it. So I don't think Sony would do that. I think they're gonna they're putting their money in their first party games. They haven't done, that I can remember, too many third party money hats for timed exclusivity, but we'll see. And also they talk about one of the main 3 protagonists will be a woman this time, which, if that's true, great. That's awesome. Want to see more representation there, but I hope that it's tasteful. I'm not a huge Grand Theft Auto player. I don't think I've really played. I haven't played 5. I played a little bit of 4, a little bit of 3. And I know the game can get pretty intense at times, so we'll see. I just hope they don't do anything controversial there. Let's see. Xbox, Microsoft. Okay, here's some juicy stuff. I really like some of these things. First off, they talk about a new Fable game, which is going to be the big announcement at E3 for them this year. Being exclusive to the Series X. It'll be a next-gen title only. I'd be in for that. It's been a long time since we've had a true Fable game, though I'm not the biggest fan, and I feel like some other games in that genre have evolved past what Fable was So I'd be curious to see what they do to make Fable feel different, and not just provide the sheen of next-gen graphics. You know, Crackdown 3 had a lot of flash and not a lot of substance, from what I understand. Didn't play it, but I know it was not received very well. And I hope Fable doesn't suffer that same fate, because I really love playing the first 2 games. They talk about Halo Infinite getting its first gameplay trailer before E3. I could see that happening, especially if Microsoft does a full Series X blowout announcement of the console in a special event sometime prior to E3, when PS4 and Xbox One, the year those came out, they each revealed the consoles and some games in special events for each console months before E3. Sony's was really early. I think Microsoft's was a little bit after that, somewhere between February and E3. And then, of course, they followed it up with more at E3, but I could see that happening with Halo Infinite. Speaking of Halo Infinite, I'm kind of jumping around on here. They talk about it being bundled with every Series X console. I do not think that's true. I mean, they also, and in that same bullet, they say that the price of the console is $499. I don't see them, $500 for the console, sure, I could see them doing that, but then taking a $60 hit on Halo Infinite, their arguably biggest title that they would launch with, assuming it's a launch title, I don't see that happening. That's Halo Infinite's the one game people will pay up for on top of getting a console. If they bundled anything in there, it wouldn't be Halo, it would be something else. But we'll see. This does say Halo Infinite would launch the same day, but then I don't, unless Halo Infinite is cross-platform, such as on Xbox One as well, I don't know why they would bundle it. I don't think that makes sense. That's got to be false. Hellblade 2 would get a gameplay trailer at E3. Yeah, I could see that happening. Why not? They also mention Halo 1, 2, 3, Reach, and Rare Replay are all coming to the Nintendo Switch. Well, I could see Halo coming to the Switch. That's been rumored for a while. Everybody's had anticipated Halo coming to the Switch, especially last year when there were rumors that Microsoft and Nintendo had some sort of partnership that ended up being Cuphead and eventually Ori also on the Switch. Hey, you know, if they do the Master Chief Collection, hey, that's awesome. It's weird that this rumor doesn't list Halo 4 or ODST. So again, it's one of those weird things where I could see them putting Halo on the Switch, but this particular rumor doesn't mention everything in the MCC, so I don't think that they know that it's really coming. Rare Replay on the Switch, sure, I could see that happening, especially now that we've got Banjo in Smash. Sure, put Rare Replay on the Switch. Let's see. And lastly, for Xbox, it will be backwards compatible with every Xbox disc ever, which would be fantastic. I've got tons of 360 games I'd love to break back out and play at some point. I don't have an Xbox One, but that would let me pick up Halo 5, which I'm not terribly excited to play it, but I'd like to play it before Halo Infinite. So yeah, I think some of that's realistic, others not so much. Sony, let's talk about Sony. Apparently they're going to show back up to E3 this year with a state of play and a booth on the show floor, but no press conference. I could see that happening. It seems like they've been taking a page out of Nintendo's book with their state of plays, and I think that's been working out for them pretty well. They moved away from PSX. They haven't announced a whole lot in the past year and a half. So I think they've been holding their cards close to their chest in anticipation of PlayStation 5. So I do think we're going to get a lot of reveals and content from them this year at E3 to build the hype for the PS5, and I could see them doing it with a state of play, and obviously having some games on the show floor for the media and the fans. So I think that's probably true. Spider-Man 2 is a PS5 exclusive, and will be announced at E3. It's funny, it says at E3 2019, so yeah, it's E3 2020 is probably what they meant to type. I could see that getting announced, sure. It's almost definitely coming. Spider-Man 2, another God of War, another Horizon, those are all going to come at some point to the PS5, so that's not a hard thing to predict. We'll see if it shows up at E3 or not. The Last of Us 2 will get an upgraded port for the PS5 at launch. Now that's interesting. I'm curious to see what they haven't announced yet, to my knowledge, what that's going to look like as far as games that release on PS4 now, such as Cyberpunk or Final Fantasy VII Remake. Are those going to get a quote-unquote PS5 version? Will there just be a patch for the folks who bought the game on PS4? You pop in the PS4 game into your PS5 and it will have, higher textures and things of that nature, better frame rates and whatnot? Or are they going to have a PS5 specific version of the game? With the transition from PS3 to PS4, there were different versions, a PlayStation 3 version of a game and a PlayStation 4 version, but that was because the PS4 wasn't backwards compatible. They've already said PS5 is backwards compatible with PS4 at least, so I hope they don't do that. I hope they release one version, the PS4 version, and that PS5 will just get a patch to upgrade it with better performance on the PS5. If they do upgraded ports, that's going to be a little messy for the games coming out this year and some of the previous games, but we shall see. And if they want to make money off of it, if it's a lot of effort to create a patch for whatever reason, for any of the games on the PS4 that they want to patch up to PS5 quality, then make it paid DLC. Don't have us repurchase the whole game. Just, throw it up there as a $10 DLC, PS5 upgrade. I'm not advocating for that. It would be really nice if it was just free, but if the business model for that won't work for the specific game, I don't want to pay for the whole game again. Let's see. Horizon Zero Dawn 2 is a launch title for PS5. I could see that happening. Horizon came out early 2017, sometime around the Zelda and Persona 5 and Nier timeframe. So it's been 3 years. That would be 3.5 years, roughly, of development. Maybe even a little longer if they had started pre-production on the sequel as they were finishing up the first game. I could see that being a surprise reveal at E3. Lastly, what they have on here is that this is the big one. So PS5 would be $500. I can see that happening. I can also see them trying to one-up Microsoft like they did last year. But I think it's still too early to tell. I think $500 might be the price for both consoles this year or this gen. They talk about no region locking, which is great for people who do imports, and that it would be backwards compatible with every PlayStation disc ever. Now, PS1 and PS2 should be relatively easy, I would think, to make backwards compatible. And when they announced backwards compatibility specifically for the PS4, I was a little upset. It's like, come on, just do PS1 and PS2. There's so many people that have plenty of discs or have bought stuff on the store, the PSN store. Give us access to our digital games too. That would be fantastic. The real big hiccup, I think, would be PlayStation 3, just because of the way the console's architecture was. But if they can get an emulator going on the PS5 and they have all PlayStation gens backwards compatible on the PS5, that is huge. Probably more so than full backwards compatibility with Xbox, the Series X, only because the Xbox One was already generally backwards compatible with everything. Not quite everything, but a lot. But PS4 wasn't. So Microsoft doesn't really have... It rings a little bit less for Microsoft to say, hey, we're backwards compatible with everything, because then it's basically just, oh great, I can play my Xbox One games on the new console. Duh, I can play everything else still too. PS5, it's like, great, I can play PS4. Oh, but finally, after all these years, I can play PS1 through 3, which would be amazing. And a lot of even PS3 owners didn't get to do backwards compatibility with, I think, PS2 games, maybe even PS1, because certain models didn't support it. So it's been a while, and it would be great to be able to play all of those old games on the PS5. All right, that's enough about Sony. Let's move on to Nintendo. Now, this is where I know that not everything on this list is true. This is clearly fake. I'm only going to talk about one thing, and that is Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes are quote-unquote next year's, so this must have been written late 2019, next year's Pokemon games, and will have the ability to transfer every Pokemon to that game after the backlash of Sword and Shield, which, while it didn't affect sales, was considered a PR blunder internally. Well, no duh. They just did a Pokemon Direct a couple days ago, and they announced expansion packs for Sword and Shield, with the last expansion pack releasing in the fall. They're not releasing Diamond and Pearl remakes this year. It's not happening. So clearly fake. Now, it's possible they are working on the remakes, and that they will come out perhaps next year, but they're not coming out in 2020. Let's see. Just a few more things here. Bethesda. Starfield is planned to get a full reveal at E3 and is set to launch in 2022. I can see that happening. I can see that being absolutely true. Starfield got revealed in 2018 at E3. So it'll have been a couple years since its reveal. They'll do the full reveal this year, and then in 2 years or year and a half, it'll launch. I can see that happening. That actually lines up pretty well. Not hard to predict that. They talk about Fallout 5 starting early planning and prototyping. Don't expect it for at least 3 years. Well, I mean, they've already announced Elder Scrolls 6 coming out after Starfield, so unless Starfield and Elder Scrolls come out back to back, I don't think they're working on Fallout 5. I mean, sure, they could be doing some early planning for it, but that's 5+ years away. I mean, that's almost, if it's not end of the gen, it's the start of the PS6 gen. They're not going to release 3 major RPGs in one gen. That's not happening. But we'll see. They mention, last thing for Bethesda, New Vegas. Fallout New Vegas would be getting an HD remaster on all the platforms, including the Switch. Now, I don't know what all platforms means. They don't specify if that's PS5 or PS4 gen. And that it would include all the DLC. Yeah, sure, I could see a New Vegas port happening. I think there's some weirdness there with because of Obsidian's involvement, so I don't know how the legalities of all that are supposed to work out, but I'd be down for an HD remaster. I could see that happening next gen instead of Fallout 5, just so they've got Fallout on the next gen consoles, but yeah, so we'll see. Let's see. Lastly, Sega. Talk about a few things here. A Sonic Adventure remake is coming. I don't think so. I don't know why that game would need a remake. Especially after they've already done HD remasters. Super Monkey Ball 1, 2, and 3 are getting HD remakes and will be released on Switch first as a timed exclusive in 2021. That's fun to think about. I don't think that's true, but they did just recently do a new Super Monkey Ball game. It would be nice to see some of the originals out there and playable. I loved the first game, playing it on the Dreamcast, so that would be nice to see HD remake of, or even a remaster. But not sure that's true. And lastly, Sonic Mania 2 is a 2020 title and is pretty much almost done. I would believe it. Sonic Mania came out in 2017. Man, that was such a great year for gaming. So it's been 3 years. So they've already got, assets developed. Sure, they're going to develop more, but they had their engine figured out. They had everything going. Sonic Mania was fantastic. Fans have been asking for a sequel. Sure, let's do it. I could see Sonic Mania 2 coming out. That's a pretty cool rumor that I hadn't thought of, to be honest. I'd forgotten about Sonic Mania. And I could see them doing a surprise release of it, perhaps over the summer. Okay, well, that's all of the rumors. If you thought any of those are going to be true, leave a comment wherever you're listening to this. I guess comments don't happen on podcasts. But if you're listening on YouTube, or if you want to come check out dirediredocs.com and find the article where this podcast exists and leave a comment, that would be fantastic. Now we're going to take a quick mental break. We're going to relax a bit. One of the reasons for this podcast is to help me combat my anxiety. So for the next minute or two, let's relax, let's meditate with some music from the gaming world. Welcome back. That was the rain and instrumental version of Beneath the Mask from Persona 5. I hope you were able to clear your thoughts, because now we're moving on to the list. So the list is a continually growing, list of every game I've ever played. And after today, there's going to be 4 total games on the list. Prior to this episode, there was only 1. We're adding 3 more for a total of 4. I'm going to talk about each of the 3 games that we are adding, and then I will reveal its ranking on the list. You can see the most up-to-date list on dirediredocs.com. All right, we're going to start with Pong. Man, we're going way back in time here. It's going to be a while before I get through all of the games I've ever played, and after the first podcast, I realized one game at a time, I'd be doing this for decades. So we're going to do 3. We're going to talk about Pong very briefly. I mean, there's not too much to talk about. I believe I played it on the Atari when I was a kid. I remember playing it in our home out in Apopka. I mean, it's Pong. It's virtual tennis, if you will. It was fun at the time, way back then. When I played it, it would have been mid-'80s, so, games like Mario and Zelda were starting to appear, which took gaming to a whole nother level. But Pong at the time was huge, and it was fun. Even back then, when you had some big adventures like Zelda, it was still fun to go play Pong, because at the time we hadn't seen anything else. There hadn't been too much games that, at least for me, I had played. So Pong's coming in at 4th on this list, if you hadn't guessed already. There's not really much to it. It is a legend in the annals of video game history, but for me, it's going down at the bottom. 3rd place is a game called Marble Madness. I hated this game, but it at least had more going for it than Pong. Marble Madness, I couldn't get used to the control schemes. There was the physics, the momentum of the ball. Man, I had trouble with it as a kid. I actually went and was looking up some stuff about it, and apparently Mark Cerny, this was his first game or his second game, one of his big claims to success. Again, Marble Madness is another one of those games from at least that particular time period that was pretty popular. It wasn't for me. So yeah, coming in at number 3. I did play it. Okay, now we're going to talk about our featured game. We'll talk about this game a little bit longer than the other two, and that's World of Warcraft. I'm going to wait till the end to reveal the ranking. Oh man, so my history with World of Warcraft goes all the way back to vanilla. I got in almost on the ground floor with the game. I had no idea what it was. I remember shortly after Halo 2 launching, and I'm going over to my buddy's house to play some Halo 2, and they were playing Warcraft, and they were like, yeah, we'll play Halo 2 in a bit. And I'm like, guys, we've been waiting for this for forever. What's going on? And I'm like watching them play it a little bit, and I'm like, what is this thing? This sounds like it's something for nerds. What? Ironic. I'm like, why? Let's go play Halo 2. And they were taking so long that I'm like, all right, screw it. And I left, and I went home and played Halo 2 by myself. But they reached out to me, and they're like, hey, you should get into this. We're all playing it. It'll be real fun. We're still going to play Halo 2, but you should play Warcraft with us because we're doing it in the meantime. And I was really close to that group of friends in college, so I'm like, sure, fine, let's do it. I don't want to be half-time with you guys and half-time by myself. So I downloaded the game. I think actually they gave me somebody had a 30-day free trial, so that's how I got in. And I downloaded it, I installed it shortly before going to work in the morning, and I logged in, made a Night Elf rogue, and I start playing the game, and within minutes, I'm like, oh wow, this is like 3D Diablo. Killing stuff, and they're dropping loot, and you've got, a character with all of these different kinds of armor that you can wear, and you have to find, and they've got different stats on them, and you've got a whole skill tree system. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the next evolution of Diablo. Now, it is not exactly like Diablo, not nearly as much loot as Diablo was, or is, but at the time, oh my gosh, it clicked immediately. And I remember having to go to work and just thinking about it all day, and I rushed home, and oh my gosh, that first area, Darnassus, that whole section was just fantastic. It blew my mind. All my friends were, I think all of them were humans, if I remember correctly. So I had to, well, no, they may not, I can't remember. Anyway, I had to get over to Stormwind, and I didn't know how. This was in the early days of WoW, so there wasn't a whole lot online at the time. People were still figuring everything out. I figured out how to take a boat to Menethil Harbor from, I think it was Darkshore, and from there, I'm like, I go walking outside, and everything's level 30, and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm not going out here. We were on a PvP server too, so I was freaking out about getting killed by the Horde, and so I'm like, how am I supposed to get all the way down to Stormwind? So I ended up jumping into the ocean, and I swam from Menethil Harbor all the way down to Stormwind, and I was freaking out thinking I wasn't going to make it in. I had to dodge some murlocs on the shore, but I made it into Stormwind like an hour later. I mean, it took a while to swim all the way around. And I got into Stormwind, and I'm running around, and I'm jumping around inside of shops, and I got stuck behind a box, and I couldn't get out. And so I'm like, oh, well, I'll just hearth out. Not realizing at the time you could go into help or system interface or something, and there was a way to nudge your character in case you got stuck. So I hearthed out, forgetting that I hadn't set a new hearth point, and I ended up back in Darnassus, and I was so mad. I just had wasted like 2 hours trying to get down there, and all gone. All completely gone. But I ended up getting back, and of course I set my hearth point to Stormwind after that. Learned a valuable lesson there. And man, just the amount of that first time when you go into an instance, we all got to around level 16 or 18 or whatever it was, and we're in Westfall, and we go down into the Dead Mines. Getting through that together for the first time was one of the best gaming experiences I've had. I mean, it took all of us playing together, which to that point I'd mostly been playing solo, and getting to see these different classes. I think we had 2 paladins. I was a rogue. We had a warlock and a warrior, I think, were the 5 that we had. And we made it work. We got all the way through. It was such a thrilling experience. Getting my first blue drop. Unreal. And, you know, moving on from there, going into Red Ridge and fighting the Horde, and as a rogue being able to go invincible when a level 50 came running around trying to kill us. So much fun. I only got into probably the level 40s. I ended up making a dwarf at one point, hunter, and got into the level 50s. I never got to 60 in vanilla. I lost interest in the grind and the questing, and I got more interested in making money. So instead of grinding experience, I was grinding gold, and I would go into the Badlands and go up where all the earth elementals were, and I would just farm them for hours on end, listening to random albums that I had just bought because I was getting into a lot of progressive music at the time, and trying to get elemental earth that I could sell for 6 gold a piece online, and that was a lot of fun. But I kept making new characters, and I never actually got to 60. And eventually it died. I stopped playing World of Warcraft. The other guys did too. And that was that. Burning Crusade came out. I ignored it. Didn't really get into it until towards the end of its life cycle. I got in and was playing with another group of friends. At this point, I was out of college. Playing with another group of friends, made a Blood Elf Warlock, and did a little bit of raiding at the time, towards the end of Burning Crusade, because they were all in a big guild, so they let me in. I think we did Karazhan, which was fun. I remember getting a dagger for my warlock that just looked so cool. But I really got in at the tail end of Burning Crusade, so I didn't get to experience it all the way everybody else did. But those first experiences in Hellfire Peninsula, just the redness of it, and then Zangermarsh, the blueness, I loved both of those zones. Those were fun, a lot of fun for me. But then came Wrath of the Lich King. Easily the best time I have ever had with Warcraft has been with Wrath of the Lich King. I got decently far with my my Blood Elf Warlock. Oh yeah, I guess I forgot to mention that when I came back to the game, if it wasn't obvious, I went over to the Horde, and to this day, I've been with the Horde ever since. Screw the Alliance. I got pretty far with my Warlock, but the Death Knight class had just come out, the hero class. You start out at 55, I think, and you do this whole entry-level thing. Eventually you get to 58, and then you can go to Burning Crusade, and you just have to get through that expansion real quick, and now you're at Death Knight. I was so excited. Hell yeah, I'm going to be a Death Knight, because it was the closest thing to a Necromancer I thought I could get. And to this day, that Tauren Death Knight, Trainfire, has been my main character ever since. I didn't look up how much playtime I had prior to recording this, but I know it's 4 digits at least on that character. Probably multiple thousands on that character. I just have been in love with Trainfire ever since. Wrath of the Lich King was great. I didn't do too much raiding. I did a little bit. Those friends, like I said, were in a guild. I didn't have the amount of time to put into the game that they did, so I didn't get to do too many raids. I think I went with them on a Nax run. I think we did Ulduar at one point, and I screwed them out of an achievement because I stepped on a mine when fighting Mimiron, if that's how you pronounce his name. They were all mad at me, and from then on I didn't really get to raid with them. Oh man, Winter Grasp was so much fun. I mean, that's all I did for the longest time was Winter Grasp. I would just circle around and collect, I think was it Astral Glory was the rare herb in there, listening to the Beatles and just flying around and herbing up some gold, and then doing the PvP when that came on. But then eventually I fell out of the game. After Wrath, Cataclysm came. I got back into it for a while. I maxed out my character, but didn't really get too much further after that. Didn't do any raiding. That expansion came and went pretty quick. I did get blasted by Deathwing while he was flying around the world, though, so that was fun. Mists of Pandaria, honestly, I didn't get into that one either. I thought it was a really cool idea, and I was into it, but all my friends had stopped playing, and so I was playing solo, and I stopped pretty quickly. I think I got through the first zone, and then that was it. I was out. But then Warlords of Draenor came, and another group of friends, work peers, we were all pre-ordering the game, so I got back in with Trainfire, got through Mists of Pandaria quickly, and went into Warlords of Draenor, and again, didn't get very far because that expansion again, wasn't great. But then Legion came. Legion revitalized the game for me. Since Wrath, it's been the single best expansion. I played the heck out of it, and it reminded me how much fun World of Warcraft could be. Even though I pretty much played it solo, I still felt like I was part of a community. I thought the class order halls were a brilliant addition to the game, because I felt like even though I was playing by myself, I'm always coming back to this zone with other Death Knights, and that was a lot of fun. That was real cool. I started getting even more invested in the lore of the game, with Khadgar and just all the different things going on, going back to Ice Crown and getting the new Lich King to help us out, and it was really cool seeing where that game went. The zones were all fantastic. High Mountain's music was just so good. And I've always been a big fan of their achievement system. I don't know why, but it really gets you out into the world to do things that you wouldn't think to do, and it really helps you understand all the different rides of the theme park you can go through. I've not been a big fan of rep grinds, but I'm doing them anyway. But the dungeon and raid achievements, I would go back and play all the old content, and it was so much fun getting to see all the stuff I had missed in the previous expansions, because I didn't raid or because I didn't play with a group at the time. And because I was getting more and more invested in the lore, it was really cool getting to go experience all of that, pretty much, not all of it, but a lot of it for the first time during Legion, and I guess a little bit Warlords of Draenor. Just being totally overpowered and going and demolishing everything is very cathartic. Battle for Azeroth. I've actually played it a decent amount of time. I've maxed out. I've got most of the reps to Exalted already, or at least Revered. I'm on my way to Exalted with all of them. I've got flying and all that. I actually, I didn't like the leveling as much in this one. I thought, oh gosh, the main zone, I know it's not Zandalar, it's Zol, whatever. I enjoyed that zone a little bit. I hated Nazmir, with a passion. And then, oh gosh, I'm terrible at remembering these names. Vormir? The place that's got the, I can't even remember their names, the Volpera. I did like that zone, but mostly because I was almost capped at the time, so I got through it pretty quick. Yeah, the game, I got it shortly after launch, only played it a little bit and quit. I did get back into it over the past couple months, and I've been playing it ever since. Got through Nazjatar, got through, oh gosh, not Nomerigan. You can tell I'm really good with the names here. What is it? Oh, this is going to drive me nuts. It's not Nomerigan, it's Mechagon. And I've just been running around and getting achievements and doing legacy content. There's a new patch coming out here pretty soon. I'm really excited for Shadowlands. I like where the lore is going there, and I think Shadowlands is going to be another one of those Legion revitalizations that the game needs, because now we have the opportunity to meet up with multiple characters, both heroes and villains, that have perished throughout the years in these different expansions, because we're essentially going into the afterlife. And it's going to be amazing to see what they have been up to, if they've had any insight into what's been going on in the living world, and if there's been any sort of war or strings being pulled behind the scenes. I'm not a fan of what they've done with Sylvanas. I think in general it's an okay idea, but they're just retreading the same ground they did with Grommash. I mean, having the Horde be the bad guy, that really sucks. And I'm glad they at least didn't make her a raid boss, but her and Hellscream, it was like, you're making the Horde out to be the bad guys. I think it was really cool, though, that at the end of the expansion, they pretty much bring the Horde and the Alliance together. Again, and tempers don't seem to be high for now. We'll see what happens once we get into the afterlife. And I'm curious to see if we're going to bring anybody back with us at the end of Shadowlands, if that's going to be a possibility. Because I really don't know where the story could go anywhere after Shadowlands, with all of the characters, on the plate again. Be really interesting to see what they do. Maybe it'll be the end of the game. I doubt it, but we'll see. Gosh, what else can I talk about with the World of Warcraft? It's I've been playing it for 15 years, and I think that says a lot about a game. Easily the most hours I've put into a game. I've never been the kind of person that's gonna grind on end and be in one of those raiding guilds that are super strict or anything. I'm in a guild now, but I don't do any raiding, and in fact most of them aren't even playing because of the quality of Battle for Azeroth. It's never been about the gear or being the best for me. It's just been about having fun in the world, experiencing the world. Like I said, the lore has been something I've really gotten into, and I really appreciate how they at some point started calling you the champion, and over the course of time, you as a character have become more and more integral to the overall storyline, which I think is really cool. It doesn't feel like you are one of a billion people like it did back in the vanilla days. It literally feels like I am one of the most important characters in the game, and for them to have pulled that off over time, I want to keep playing because this game can't go on without me. I'm one of the most important characters. I think that was unintentional or not. I think it was a great thing for them to do, because not a lot of games get to do that, or they only do it for short periods of time and then you get bored and move on. WoW has done something unique there. I think most MMOs could do it, but most MMOs have not survived the amount of time that WoW has. So yeah, I could talk about the music, which is great. I could talk about the visuals that they've upgraded over time. I could talk about, the Pokemon system. I could talk about hunting for mounts and transmogs and toys. And I'd never really got into PvP all that much other than Winter Grasp. Yeah, I don't know what else to say other than World of Warcraft is one of those special games. I'm not going to give it a rating, but it rates pretty high. It's definitely in the top echelon. So it comes down to that or Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII, prior to this podcast, was the only game on the list, so it was number one. And now it's time to make a decision. Does World of Warcraft enter the list at number 1 or number 2? Ultimately, I'm going to put World of Warcraft in at number 2. It just didn't quite hit the same personal notes that Final Fantasy VII did. I think it's kind of hard to do that with the tight, polished, really fantastic single-player games. World of Warcraft has definitely had its low points, but overall, it's been one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had, and it definitely deserves to be remembered in the annals of gaming history, and it absolutely will. I mean, it's a legendary game at this point. One of the longest running, if not the longest running game ever. Just fantastic all around. So congrats, World of Warcraft. You enter in at number 2. We'll see how long you stay there. We'll be adding 3 more games to the list in the next podcast. But for now, these are our 4. World of Warcraft, number 2. So that does it for this episode of the Dire Dire Podcast. Thank you for listening. Again, please check out dirediredocs.com for podcast updates and updates on other content on the channel. Right now, as of this particular recording, we've got one video for top 10 music tracks from Super Mario 3. I'm going to be doing some more of those. I have some content ideas for other videos that I want to make. I actually had done a reaction to the Pokemon Direct, and then I was going to do a post-reaction to it and summarize it, but the Direct was so poor quality, I didn't have much to react to, and even the post-reaction that I did record was pretty lame, so I just scrapped the whole thing and didn't post it. But next time there's a decent Direct or conference of some kind, you can bet I will have some videos up for that. I also want to, I don't want to commit to this yet, but I'm pretty sure I'll do it at some point. Create a series, I don't know what I'm going to call it, but looking at the art of trailers, the more popular trailers that have appeared over the years, thinking back to games like Halo 2, which we talked about a little bit in this podcast. When that announcement trailer first came out, talking about how well they executed that trailer, considering the popularity of Halo at the time and just the context of, the gaming culture and what people were looking forward to, and how they capitalized on that with the music and the setting and what they showed in the trailer. I think that would be a fun series to do, because there's plenty of really amazing trailers out there that are legendary trailers. So we'll see. Look for that. Also on diredocs.com, I have a little journal going. Nothing major, but if you want to see what I've been up to, different things that are on my mind, gaming related or site related, that's where you will find that. Again, thank you for listening. This is Sean Pfeil, and this has been the Dire Podcast.